David Brewster here with the new Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is Updates and Upgrades 2023. And I wanted to put this episode together because, I've got a new Telecaster with a new pickguard. I even put new tuners on this puppy. I've got a new haircut. And I just really want to kick this year off with this episode, which I'm going to answer some questions. I've received lots of questions about my guitars. What year's my Strat? What year's your Les Paul? What pickups are in this guitar or that guitar? And now that I have 4 kind of powerhouse electrics in my studio, I wanted to feature each one and kind of reveal the year and what I did differently or upgraded, with each guitar. This is one of my favorite areas of guitar owning, because once you buy a guitar, you can tweak it out. You can change the pickguard, the knobs, the switches, the tuners, all sorts of stuff. I love doing this. So obviously I have a thing for tortoiseshell pickguards, and I also like guitar picks too that are tortoiseshell. But I just love the look. I mean, it's like this lava, kind of bubbly, weird world, in the tortoiseshell pattern or whatever. And you can just stare at that for an hour and kind of get lost in it. But, my Strat, the Paul Reed Smith, and the Telecaster all have, tortoiseshell pickguards. And I didn't do that with the Les Paul. But then once I kind of did this, it was kind of funny when I bought this guitar and it had the white pickguard. I was playing it and loving it. But I would look at it, or even just looking down at it, and it felt like I was playing somebody else's guitar, or I borrowed it. And then as soon as I changed this pickguard, it was like, hey, now it's my guitar. And aside from changing the pickguard, I also changed the tuners, and I installed these Fender locking tuners yesterday. They have the vintage style, smaller head, so they look similar to what was already on there. But these are the locking tuners from Fender. And they're so easy to install. And I installed these yesterday, and I actually filmed a little portion during the installation so you could see just how easy it is. Okay, I still have one left to do. So here's the new locking tuner. There's the old vintage style. I left the low E string. But watch this, it's so easy. You really just need a wrench and your fingers. There's the old tuner, the vintage style. Here's the new tuner. You don't have to drill or anything. It just pops right on. Just give it a real careful tighten right here. And there you can see the new tuners are installed, and that's so easy. It took like 10 minutes and it's done. So cool. Obviously is the Strat, and this was originally a 1996 American Floyd Rose Classic Stratocaster, and obviously I've modified this like crazy. Changed the neck. Actually, here's the original neck. It used to have a maple neck, and I wore the finish off the back and ended up sanding that. And I don't know if you can see the fret wires, but I played the frets. There's grooves all through those frets. I mean, I almost played this neck off the guitar. And then I changed it. I actually got rid of the Floyd, installed just a regular, kind of Sander style bridge. Changed the pick guard. I've changed, actually the only parts of the guitar that are original are the body, the jack plate, and the neck plate in the back. The neck, the tuners, I bought this preloaded pick guard, a couple years ago. The pickups here, that's a Shawbucker and 2 Generation 4 noiseless Fender single coils. And then also I had the upgraded, electronics and stuff too. This is my buddy. Like this has been with me for so long. It's like a family member or an old friend or whatever. It's like a comfy pair of jeans or some old tennis shoes. Like this is my guitar. So throughout this episode, I'm going to add some suggestions, tips, and ideas for some things that you can do to kind of upgrade and improve your guitar at home. And obviously, yeah, you can go out and spend money for preloaded pick guards and necks and tuners and stuff, but those things are expensive. And here's kind of a cost-effective upgrade. And it actually, really does wonders where it's like, wow, did that really change my guitar that much? And that's screwing your guitar. And I'm not talking about doing some weird illegal thing. I'm talking about actually changing the screws on your guitar. And, like say for instance, maybe they're all rusted, and you've been sweating and, kind of rusted and corroded your screws. Run out and buy, the appropriate size. They're like 1/2 inch screws. You can actually just take one out of your guitar and take it to a music store or Lowe's or Menards or hardware store, Ace Hardware or something. And that way you're guaranteed you've got the right size. But you can change, the rusty ones back to nice and shiny chrome. Maybe you've got a black guitar. Try black screws in your guitar. That looks really cool. Or a contrast, like maybe you have a red guitar, change the chrome screws to black, and that looks kind of cool too. And actually, I had a student about 10 years ago, and he was building like a steampunk guitar. He wanted to look like he'd pulled it out of the ocean and it was all rusty and stuff. And he actually found these coated screws. I guess it was for like furniture or something. But he found these coated kind of rusty screws. It looks so cool. Okay, hypothetical situation. Let's say you take my advice, you run out and buy some screws, and then you start replacing, the screws in your guitar one at a time. Make sure you do it that way. Don't take all your screws out at once. Just replace, one at a time. That way you're not going to mess anything up. But let's say you find a screw hole and it's stripped, and your screw is, having trouble, threading. Well, there's an old trick you can use. Grab some wood glue. You can actually use Elmer's glue or anything. I like Gorilla Glue. But, wood glue of some sort and toothpicks. And then literally take the toothpick, dip it into the glue just a little bit, stick it down in the hole that's stripped, and then break the toothpick off to where it's kind of flush with the guitar. And then add that screw. And you should see that it's going to tighten and it's going to fill that stripped hole. And then speaking of screws and wood glue and toothpicks and upgrades and all this stuff, if your tool selection in your studio or in your stash of gear, if your tools are lacking, and I believe I've talked about these before, especially if you're a Fender guitar owner, you almost have to buy one of these Fender, tool pouches. It's just jam-packed with, appropriate tools that are the right size for Fender guitars and also other guitars, brands and stuff too. But I can't tell you how many times I've used this. I've had this for about 3 years. I use this pouch almost every day. I'm constantly unzipping this and pulling something out. But you've got Allen wrenches, you've got string height, rulers, and there's a socket right here that's the right size, like for your, the input jack nut, also the nuts on your tuners. And that's like specific to Fender guitars. Like this is really, handy to have. And aside from Fender guitars, I mean, you can definitely use some of these tools on other brands. I use, tools in here on my Les Paul and Paul Reed Smith all the time. So this is really cool. Up next is my year 2000 Gibson Les Paul Standard, and I bought this brand new in the year 2000. And that blows my mind that my guitar could walk into a bar and order a drink. It's 23 years old. That's crazy. But I bought it brand new. I was teaching at More Music in Evansville, Indiana back then, and the guitar came in with one of their shipments. And then one of the salesmen pulled me aside and was like, "Hey Dave," and this guitar never even made it to the sales floor. We walked in the back room. He opened that case and I could hear Angel singing and Jeff Beck licks, and I thought, oh no. Took it back in my studio where I taught, fell in love with it like in 1 minute, and I had to have it, so I worked out a deal and acquired the guitar. But this guitar is actually more famous than really any of my other guitars, in my studio. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, it was actually 10 years ago. I wrote my own feature article and lesson for Premier Guitar, and that would have been the January 2013 issue with "I Lost a Fight with an Elevator." And there's a picture of my x-rayed hand. There's a picture of my swelled up wrist or hand. There's my Les Paul, the beginning of the lesson, more lesson and text. But if you have this issue, that's the January 2013 issue, you can also find it on their website. So instead of retelling the story here on camera, just read my article that was in Premier Guitar. And also with my Les Paul, I really haven't modified or changed that much. I did change and put locking tuners on here. It's like the Grover, it kind of replaced, the original Grovers that were on here. I also changed the pickups, of course. There's a Seymour Duncan JB humbucker and a Pearly Gates. And I also installed the pre-wired Emerson, electronics kit, which made a huge difference in the tone. Of course, I've changed the jack and the switch before, but everything else on this guitar is stock. Now, for another really easy and inexpensive upgrade for your guitar, you may not think it would really make that big of a difference, visually, but it really does. And that's the knobs on your guitar, the volume and tone knobs. And, there's lots of different options and styles and looks. But, if you're like me, I'm constantly looking for little things that I can add or tweak to kind of make my guitars more personalized, for me. And this is really easy. But I actually did a search last night online, and I just searched custom guitar knobs, and I was blown away because I hadn't done that in a long time. There's a whole bunch, a whole new world of guitar knobs just waiting out there. I was really impressed. Of course, last but not least is my Paul Reed Smith. This is the S2 Vela series, and this was the most inexpensive American-made Paul Reed Smith when I bought it 2 years ago in 2020. And it's a great guitar. I love this guitar. And I did change the humbucker here. This originally had like a Paul Reed Smith humbucker. I don't remember what model it was, but that's the JB humbucker I replaced it with from Seymour Duncan. And then that's the stock Type D single coil that Paul Reed Smith, had in the guitar. I think that's actually modeled after an old DeArmond pickup, which that's why it's called Type D. I also changed the pickguard. Originally this had a black pickguard, and I did somehow find, which I haven't been able to find it since, so luckily I found it before it disappeared, but there was a pre-wired kit from Emerson for the Vela series, and I bought one of those. It had upgraded, electronics and stuff. But this is a killer guitar, and it's totally different than the other guitars in my arsenal. So if I'm looking for that kind of weird, in between or, following the cracks kind of guitar, it's usually this one. So here's another tip, and this really isn't an upgrade. This is more or less kind of just some information, and that's, how to date your guitar. And no, I'm not talking about something weird. I'm not talking about taking your guitar to Cheesecake Factory and proposing to it. Not that kind of date. I'm talking about like the birthday, like the age or year of your guitar. And a lot of players never even thought of this. I've talked to some people and they're like, wow, I never even thought about that. But then, I've definitely been following this and developing, online, because once upon a time, a long time ago, 20 years ago or whatever, it was really hard to find this information. You'd have to call like Green Guitars or something to try to track down like the year, using your serial number, and it's really difficult. Now you can literally find, like on Fender's website, they have a serial number, kind of dating, app or whatever. Gibson's site, had some information or whatever, Paul Reed Smith's site or whatever. And there's also a website called the Guitar Dating Project, I think it's called. And you can literally find like the year, also the month. Actually, my Les Paul, it gave me the specific date, and it actually is my sister's birthday. My Les Paul was born on July 24th, 2000. And when I saw that, I was like, no way, that's my sister's birthday. But it's really cool. It kind of gives your guitar even more character or personality, because then you actually know like the official birth date. And this Paul Reed Smith and the Telecaster I recently bought, I didn't buy it brand new in a store in person. I ordered these guitars. And after this one arrived, and also the Telecaster, I was curious, like, hey, were these guitars like sitting in a warehouse, something? Like, are these actually a year old or 2 years old or something? But then looking up their serial numbers and finding their dates and everything online, it reassured me. This, I really couldn't find the month, but it was made in 2020, which was the year I bought it. And then my Telecaster was literally made the month before I ordered it. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with updates and upgrades 2023. And like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to put this episode together because I have noticed lots of people messaging and commenting, asking me specifics about my guitars. And especially with new subscribers, coming to the channel, I've noticed there's a lot of people that have asked about this. You know, what year's your Les Paul, or what pickups are those, or what pickups are in your Strat, or what pickups that in your Paul Reed Smith, and additional, you know, guitar-related questions. So there I have a new Tele. I changed the pickguard and the tuners, and then I started looking at my guitars, and I thought, you know what, let's feature the whole family. You know, come on down, like the Showcase Showdown or whatever. But I just wanted to kind of just flesh this out and reveal, you know, what I have and what pickups, you know, I put in the guitars and little upgrades and stuff. And this is addictive because once you change like maybe your pickguard screws or your knobs or something, maybe you change the pickup or something or your tuners, you're going to start looking at your guitar a little different. And like that student I mentioned earlier that had the rusty screws, I was just impressed because he bought the guitar and then over, it was like 3 months or so, it morphed into a completely different guitar. And it just looked really cool. I thought, man, they should make guitar. I wish I had a picture of it or something so I could show you. But they should make guitars that look like that because it was weathered. It wasn't like road worn. He was doing some really cool stuff to it. But the screws, as soon as he added that, I could see what he was thinking. And then over time, he just kind of really, you know, made his guitar his and personalized, which is so cool. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Nat Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.